we're going to continue this outside of this space. And next week, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to bring us right back into the remainder of this interview for part 2 of disability theology. And so this was all stemming from an inclusivity conversation. I was shocked at some of the microaggressions I read in the articles as it pertains to people with disabilities, such as, "That's so lame. That guy is crazy. You're acting so bipolar today. It's like the blind leading the blind. My ideas fell on deaf ears. I'm super OCD about how I clean my room. And lastly, I don't even think of you as disabled." I found these most interesting because I've heard them so many times. And if we're being honest, we definitely have used some of these in our everyday lives socially without even considering that this could be and is offensive to some people. But the one that shocked me the most, Brother Brian, was, "Can I pray for you?" When I saw that, I said, whoa. I said, how can that be? How can that be offensive? But the more I thought about it, I could see how that could be offensive to someone. What can you share with the viewers about ableist microaggressions? And how can we recognize them in our own conversations, but also in conversations with others? Also, is there a way for us to show the love of God in a way that doesn't offend our brothers and sisters with disabilities?
So with the microaggressions, they're very much related to some of the laws and having institutions for people with disabilities historically. Like, for example, words like crippled, stupid, moron, and the R slur. And I think I'll just say it for our viewers, but is the word retard. Those are all words that came about from insane asylums, mental hospitals, and were used in institutions, and they're very degrading to people with disabilities and whatnot. And I would say they've always made me uncomfortable, even when I wasn't exactly aware of the challenges that people with disabilities face, including my own. But like growing up, when I struggled being in public school, I would get called stupid and lazy, and because of my capability or things I struggled to do. And it was always hurtful. And I would say one of the challenges is being with how living with a disability is when you try to advocate, you get gaslighted and people disregard. So these microaggressions, when many people with disabilities, when they deal with them, when they try to ask people to stop, they very often get gaslighted or disregarded and ignored. And over time it hurts. It makes you kind of question, am I really stupid? Am I really this or that? Or am I really lazy when in reality, your disability is just a part of who you are, and it's just a challenge you have. Like, I know people with ADHD, that's something that they've had to deal with, and other similar disabilities. And I believe to some extent people with chronic illness get told, and how it manifests is not just the language, but a frustration towards that person with a disability over something that person cannot control. And so it takes a mindfulness on all of us to be mindful of what we think and what we use to communicate. And also this language manifests in the church too. Like, for example, some time ago, I asked someone I personally know in seminary formation to be mindful of the language he was using in a reflection. And it was on the reading on Bartimaeus, the blind man that Jesus meets on the side of the road. And this person used the phrase spiritual blindness. And I asked, can you please be mindful and not use that language? And the person said, okay. And then came to me later in the day. Well, what was wrong with what I said? And at the time, I couldn't remember what was the phrase. And so he had the reflection and read it. And I said, okay, it's this phrase, spiritual blindness. Please don't use that. And because it implies there's something wrong with being blind, that being blind is sinful. And there are theological implications too, because when you're saying something like spiritual blindness, spiritual deafness, blind or deaf to God's will, it implies that disability is bad, that disability is sinful, and it raises a theological question of, does that mean that people with disabilities and people in particular who are blind and deaf, are they able to be saved? Or does that mean they're not able to because of their disability? And so that's why the microaggression in the language is important, not just in society, but also what we use within the church. And which leads to I pray for you, because there are people who, from being active in the church and how they interpret the Bible and how they understand their own theology, is that people with disabilities need to be prayed for to be cured of their disabilities. And I would say I gather that is something that's prominent in evangelical churches, but I don't deny that it happens in Catholic churches. And so it's important that someone like myself, training to be a seminarian, and others who are priests and training to become Catholic priests, to have some awareness about people with disabilities and the language we use in homilies and reflections.
Now, Brother Brian, I'm gonna be honest with you. I have used the term spiritual blindness before, totally not even understanding that was an offensive term. Just to broaden our understanding here, what would you say would be a better way of saying that? What would be the better way of articulating that?
I would say maybe being unaware, or lack of awareness, or you could even say being ignorant of such and such. So I would probably not even say spiritual blindness, but lack of awareness to God's presence, or to lack of awareness to how God is speaking to me and what is God's will in my life. That would probably be more appropriate.
Oh, okay. Like subconscious ignorance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Thank you so much. You know, that's really helpful in steering us away from like theological ignorance or inaccuracy. So thank you very much for that. For those both watching and listening, Brother Brian, who live with a particular disability, How can they begin to see themselves in the likeness of God? And what does ministry life look like for those discerning a religious vocation?
Okay. I know language like what was used in that document, in Dignitas Infinita, that would still raise questions for someone with a disability. Like, say, okay, it's nice to hear that every human being has dignity, but what is that in practice? Or how is that, or what's the application of that? And I know that's a challenge for the church and for leadership in the church and clergy and religious. So for me, what I like to go to is the person who founded disability theology, which is the author Nancy Easlin, and her book called The Disabled God. And I have the book here, if I could show it. There we go. Now I can. Yeah. So in the book, she argues that when Jesus resurrected, his wounds were not only that he died and resurrected, but also that even Jesus had a disability. And I would like to maybe read a little bit from the book. And so, and she cites the Gospel Luke 24, verse 36 to 39, which was when Jesus appeared to the disciples in the upper room, and they thought he was a ghost. And he's like, no, it's me. And he's like, look at my hands and my feet and see that it's me. And so he's showing them his wounds. And if you think about those wounds that he received from the passion, from being crucified, for anyone to survive that, they would be disabled. They would have to be disabled from that. And so what Nancy Easlin writes is, said, the resurrected Jesus, in presenting impaired hands and feet and side to be touched by frightened friends, alters the taboo of physical avoidance of disability and calls for followers to recognize their connection and equality at the point of Christ's physical impairment. Christ's disfigured side bears witness to the existence of hidden disabilities as well. But yeah, so in a sense, in the resurrection, there's the signs of disability there. And there can be arguments made, well, Jesus is human and God, but the post-resurrection, the wounds stay there. And what I would personally argue is, with those wounds, Jesus is taking on the sin of ableism. And I would also say identifying with the human experience of people with disabilities, with the ableism, the microaggressions, the exclusion, the alienation and marginalization of people with disabilities. That Jesus Christ, that God understands the experiences of my own experience with being excluded and discriminated as a person with a disability, and all my brothers and sisters with disabilities. And so that's how I would respond to that. For anyone with a disability is discern that vocation and explore whether you feel a call to with the diocese or with a religious order. And I've heard of religious orders out there that do have members with disabilities. And I saw something in Europe that there was one or two orders that have members that are exclusively with blindness, and also members who have Down syndrome. So I don't know of any here in the US. And I would say if you have a vocation, discern, pray about it, and remember that your disability is not a hindrance. It doesn't prevent you from being loved by God or having any hindrance to doing ministry for other people and serving God's people in the church.
If you want to learn more about the Holy Spirit Missionary Sisters and to get a better understanding of the history, I invite you to visit our website today, www.SSpS-usa.org. And if you yourself are wondering if God has something in this life for you to do, regardless of whether you have a disability or not, God is calling all of us to a particular vocation. The Holy Spirit Missionary Sisters would love to walk this discernment journey with you. So give us a call at 847-441-0126. We love you and we thank you so much for joining us today. And until next time, remember, we're going to be walking this life one sip at a time. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you again, Sister Monica, for this beautiful gift. May the Lord bless each and every one of us. Until next time. Bye-bye.